Hello, viewers, and welcome to Leslie and Hill 1244 Stone Pot. I'm your host, and here are today's top stories. Stay tuned because we'll bring you the latest updates.
At least 1.5 million Palestinians in Gaza need emergency shelter aid, UN. Total Hamas disarmament not achievable, not likely at this stage. Gaza City transformed into piles of dust, shades of gray. Israeli forces arrest groom, father, on way to wedding west of Ramallah. Palestinian factions agree to implement ceasefire and hand over Gaza governance to technocrats.
Before we dive into the details, make sure to subscribe to Leslie and Hill 1244 Stone Pot and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any breaking world updates.
The UN's International Organization for Migration, IOM, has said shelter needs remain dire in the Gaza Strip, with about 90% of the population displaced and at least 1.5 million people in need of emergency shelter assistance. The agency said 31,000 shelter items, including 2,500 tents, have been sent to Gaza since the ceasefire was announced earlier this month. But that falls short of what's needed to help residents, thousands of whom have returned to northern Gaza to find their homes totally destroyed. The IOM also stressed that it has 28,000 additional tents waiting in Jordan for as many as 168,000 people, as well as blankets, mattresses, and other items, including tarpaulins and solar lanterns for Palestinians living in makeshift shelters. But Israel's continued restrictions on aid have blocked those items from being delivered. With very few tents or tarpaulins available, some are using flour and rice sacks to shield themselves from the elements, IOM said. The group's Director General, Amy Pope, said shelter resources are desperately needed as people in Gaza have endured unimaginable loss. They need help that reaches them quickly and safely through every possible route and entry point. Shelter isn't a luxury. It is what allows families to rest, to stay warm, and to begin rebuilding their lives. Without it, recovery cannot begin. As Washington tries to iron out the details of Phase 2 of Trump's Gaza plan, including a demand for Hamas to disarm, analyst Rob Geist-Pinfold says, quote, all sorts of compromises are possible on disarmament. Hamas could, for example, agree to give up its heavy weapons, things like its long-range rockets and mortars, whilst keeping its small arms, said Pinfold, a lecturer in international security at King's College London. The issue here will be Israel. Netanyahu has campaigned on total victory, the total destruction, the disarmament of Hamas, which will mean that Israel will drag its feet all the way. Pinfold told Al Jazeera that completely disarming the Palestinian group at this stage is not achievable and not likely. The group will be basically committing institutional suicide and giving up something which it won't be able to get back in the future to use as leverage against Israel. If we are going to see any disarmament of Hamas, it's likely to be some kind of a compromise solution rather than the wholesale disarmament of the group.
We've been walking around, driving between residential blocks that have largely been turned into piles of dust. The only thing we see here are shades of gray around Gaza City. As soon as people arrive here, the happiness that they had on their faces as they returned just fades away right away as soon as they see the piles of ruins. They're very hopeless, very helpless. We are in an area that housed the UNRW headquarters. The white and blue building, very visible, marked the headquarters for central operations for UNRW across the Gaza Strip. It has been destroyed completely. The building that went from UNRW's center of operations to a shelter for displaced families is now standing here in ruins.
Israeli forces have arrested a groom and his father while they were going to Rantis town, west of Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank, to bring the bride. The Wafa news agency reported, citing local sources, that soldiers stopped the car carrying Aoun Safi and his father, Mazen Safi, at the entrance to the town and detained and arrested them. Troops also seized the car's key. The sources added that the arrest occurred as the family was on its way to complete the wedding ceremony.
Following a meeting with different Palestinian factions in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, Hamas says the meeting came as part of preparations to hold a comprehensive, quote, national dialogue to protect the national project and restore national unity, end quote. The Palestinian forces stressed that the current phase requires a unified national stance and a national political vision based on unity of voice and destiny, and the rejection of all forms of annexation and displacement in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Jerusalem, according to a statement by Hamas. It outlined 5 points that the factions had agreed on, which included, quote, support and continue implementing the ceasefire agreement measures, including the lifting of the blockade and the opening of all crossings in Gaza, end quote. Handing over the administration of the Gaza Strip to a temporary Palestinian committee composed of independent technocrats from the Strip, end quote. Establishing an international committee to oversee the financing and implementation of the reconstruction of the Strip, end quote. Taking all necessary measures to maintain security and stability throughout the Strip, and calling for an end to all forms of torture and violations against prisoners in occupation prisons, end quote. Continuing joint work to unify visions and positions to confront the challenges facing the Palestinian cause, end quote.